That sooner. There we go. Um, so welcome everyone to our Lunch and Learn with Erica. um, Really, as we've been doing, this is an opportunity to connect, to have these kinds of conversations. So I'm so glad that we've been able to do that and share stories and hopefully learn from each other during our little lunch hour here. Um, so as I said, this is a little bit of like, let's see, Erica, respond to the slides I've put together here. Don't worry, Erica, it's pretty simple. So I think you all know Erica. She's the founder of Engineers of Tomorrow. Her and I go all the way back to Queen's Engineering, where we met doing, guess what, engineering outreach at Science Quest. So we've known each other for quite some time. Lots of really neat kind of overlap and points of connection there that she can maybe get into a little further. So I will turn it over to you, Erica, and I'll tell you there's only
For
four
sure.
slides. Okay.
All right. I'm good with that. I can see them. So
Okay.
you want me to go into my story?
Erica's
Okay.
story.
So I grew up in a rural community and I didn't really have engineering on my radar at all. I call it a happy accident that I ended up being an engineer at all because someone in my rural high school said to me, "Hey, you're good at math and science. Why don't you think about engineering?" And I love, Andrea, what you were saying about connecting the engineering and the technical subject matter expertise to an impact, to making a difference in people's lives. And I think something about, being from a town with lots of agriculture in it, like I was very committed to making tangible change in the world around me. Like I love to dig puddles, dig in the puddles and, make little trenches between the puddles after it rained as a kid. I was a very hands-on kid and I was very curious and I was always motivated to try to do things differently. And I wasn't that good with hands-on. Like my dad was a carpenter, but I didn't really get into using tools. I wasn't that confident in that tinkerer sort of inventor kind of persona, really. And I might have been intimidated if someone had explained that kind of like Rosie Revere engineer kind of story to me at the time as a kid. But like I said, I followed this sort of vague direction that engineering might be for me because I was good at math and science. And it turned out to be a very good fit. So I started my career in manufacturing, moved over to mining, got into continuous improvement. Again, with the making things better, I always wanted to do that. And connecting back to having a positive impact on people using my sort of analytical problem solving side. That's all I ever really wanted to do. And I guess I had a hypothesis, a hope that that's what engineering was about. And then I managed to live my way into that story, as I would say. So how's that for an abbreviated version of my engineering origin story, Becky? We have a whole module that we ask EIRs and our volunteers to get into as far as how to tell your story from the human impact side. So how's that for an abbreviated version
I
to get our
love it.
conversation started?
Can you connect the dots or maybe expand a little bit more on that leading into Engineers of Tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure that we weren't counting on happy accidents and flukes to get kids into engineering. I say sometimes, like, you got to get the memo about engineering. The memo that I got was pretty late. It was kind of scribbled on the back of a napkin, metaphorically, and it was again, it was a bit of a fluke. So I really think that there are great stories to tell about engineering that are not covered in the stereotypes. They're not covered in the media. They're not sort of part of our discourse outside of our little bubble of engineering amazingness, which I absolutely love talking to our fellow volunteers who are in on the mission here. But broadly speaking, parents, educators, people don't necessarily know how to tell their kids what engineering is or what STEM is in general. It gets very sort of pigeonholed, I find. Science is about mixing things up in the kitchen, or it's, engineering is about, I don't know, driving trains or building bridges. Like it's very simplistic. Whereas I think the way we try to tell stories is much more of yeah, just sort of connecting that humanity, connecting the realities of the way that things are happening out there in the world, and shaping that for the better. Like, what more fun could there be? I don't know. Like, how could anyone resist that pitch when you put it that way?
Awesome. Again, this can be a conversation. So, any questions for Erica? Does that bring anything up for everyone? For anyone? Can you relate?
Yeah, hi. I'm happy to add to that. I mean, I've had lots of conversations like this, also sort of at different levels, and I can relate to, some of the experiences that you shared, just sort of growing up and like, um, how accessible engineering was, even with my dad as an engineer, just the way he described things, where I was not particularly excited about it. And then also, I don't know what all of you found, but often we've had discussions around, the excitement of sort of going into an engineering program, and then some of the traditional approaches in undergraduate engineering
Oh
experiences,
yeah.
and people are,
Mm-hmm.
like, why do we have this um, the leaky pipeline kind of situation, right? Where people are leaving and who is leaving, right? So, yeah, I don't know. One of the other thoughts that sort of came to mind is when we've talked about sort of different roles of, again, with because I teach at McMaster, and I'm affiliated with Queen's Engineering as well. So, what's the difference between at McMaster, they have the engineering program, they also have the BTech program. So Bachelor of Technology versus, engineering. So what are we doing in engineering? And I'll sort of throw that question out there because I've had discussions around this, but maybe that's something where you can throw in your perspectives of what we do as engineers that does go, sort of beyond the technology and
Mm-hmm.
other tech professions.
Yeah, I love that. I I mean, I don't know if I have an exact answer for technology, but I'm a big fan of CBC radio. And there's the science show, there's Quirks and Quarks, and then there's the tech show, Spark, right? And it's like, well, there's so much engineering in the background of all of those. So I think partly it's a messaging thing. Like, engineering in general does not have great PR, and I think some of it stems from a pride that we have in doing our work and keeping our head down and being of service and being humble and being content to be kind of behind the scenes, right? Like, if we do our jobs well, nobody needs to hear about engineering, right? Because that's mostly where it comes up in the context of disasters. um, when things blow up, then okay, now we work backwards and figure out the o-ring on the space shuttle, right? For as like a famous engineering example. Um, but I think that there's also something to the teaching, or the truism, I guess, that it's not just about what you do, it's also about who knows what you do. And if you're doing something and you want to get credit for it, you need to make sure you know how to tell the story as well. And this is something I learned, my first couple of years into my manufacturing job, where I realized I had chosen engineering in part because I liked the certainty. I liked knowing, you put these two materials together, they're going to act this way. You do this, you run these numbers, they're always going to add up. That analysis is always true. These are places we can go when we're looking for certainty in a world where maybe things don't make sense, right? And then I got into the workplace and I realized, oh my goodness, it's not just about who's right. It's not just about the best solution. It's about who's buying in, who understands the solution, who's got the pull to make this solution happen, for example. There are all these other sort of human levels of murkiness and subjectivity, which frankly I chose engineering to get away from those. But I say sometimes my dad's a carpenter, the sort of the physical technical side, and my mom's a psychologist. So I'm this mix of the two. And I think, I realized, okay, joke's on me. My mom was right about you can't escape the people element and the wonderful complexities that we have as human beings. And learning how to tell the story. That was where I started to go with that. Learning how to tell the story, learning how to be visible with what you do. I think we could argue, and I would argue, that that's an important part of doing the job as well, because we are dependent on the ability of our profession to explain itself to the general public in order to assure that we're going to have a talented pipeline of people interested in, you know, replacing us as the engineers of tomorrow.
I'd like to throw a comment, Bev? Yeah, I'd like to throw something out at the group, I guess. I've been doing this outreach thing since, I don't know, I graduated in 79.
I know.
And I have this theory now that women aren't broken. We're fine. But the engineering profession has to change. And I would like to see it start with the university entrance requirements. I don't think you should, if you want people who can communicate, who are not arrogant, who are not introverts, who will work with social issues, then you've got to let them in the program to start with. So you can't make people drop all their outside interests just to get into the engineering program. Mm-hmm. And as long as you keep doing that, as long as you keep screening out people who think, well, I'm not sure if I would rather take music, or do I have to drop all of that just to get into engineering school and then get through it?
To get the super high marks. Yeah.
We all know engineers who have other talents, but I don't think that you can ask people who you've screened to be maths and science, hard numbers, black and white type thinkers. If you've screened people like that to go into your program, you can't fault them for not being creative communicators, warm, fuzzy people.
I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear your maybe a few words from you, Nathan. So Nathan, as we said, is one of our co-op students. He's studying mechanical engineering at University of Waterloo, but he also, can I say you identify as an artist, right, Nathan? Is that
right? So I felt like not too long ago, I was actually in that admissions process, and I definitely felt like I was being pressured into like having to get the good grades and like, you know, sort of brush aside my other hobbies and passions. When in all honesty, like engineering is sort of kind of like a bridge between a lot of other disciplines as well, right? So my creativity in art isn't much different from my creativity in engineering design, right? So I felt like a lot of my peers also felt that way as well. Like they felt like they were being sort of disabled in a sense because they felt like they needed to get these really high grades, and in order to do that they needed to sacrifice time from other areas or portions of their life, right? And so that really gets me going, because I think the admission process should change as well, right? We can't keep like pressuring these kids into thinking that you are only like bound to do one thing and one thing only, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so like to get into Waterloo right now, I'm not sure what the marks have to be, but pretty much if you wanted to get in, you would have to devote your final year in high school to getting in, right? So that means, like for me, I just said I loved music, I loved other arts, and I said, okay, you get the first semester. I had grade 13, right? But I would study as much as I could, work as hard as I could. If I didn't get in on my early entrance marks, too bad. I'm not doing this for any longer. I didn't realize that, you know, university was going to be harder yet, and then you'd be working all-nighters in industry. But yeah, in our small town, there's a lot of engineers, and the reputation is not good. To call yourself an engineer is to say, I'm a know-it-all, arrogant, non-people person. So mostly I don't say I'm an engineer, because it's not within a community setting looked at as a really great thing. right? And my teacher partner had some horrible experiences bringing engineers into her classroom. One engineer actually told her that her kids weren't smart enough. Like, yeah. So to me, if people are saying that the problem is that girls drop physics too early, I don't do physics. I had a horrible time with physics, our half semester that chemical engineers had to do, but I don't feel like I'm lacking anything. I could have easily swapped up physics for English literature, so, or studying technical Russian.
Yeah,
Anyways,
I love what you said earlier too, just in terms of the context of the classroom situation right now and what the teachers and the students need. And I think that, you know, it sort of fits with what you were saying, Erica, about like, what is the story, right? And the story goes just so beyond the bridges that you're building with the students or the pulley systems to, you know, what do they actually need in terms of engagement right now? You know, maybe they just need something to inspire them, and like that might be the stuffed animal that you've brought into the classroom. And that's just, yeah, I really like
I totally agree.
that bigger side of it. So I think
I mean,
awesome.
maybe just being human is enough.
Yeah.
You know, maybe showing up to tell your story and opening your heart and making them feel something. Maybe that's the most important thing you could give them. I mean, we can't know. It's so interesting and so complex, and I think can be a little scary for some engineers who rely on the I'm smart part of their story to feel important. Maybe I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing a little, Bev, about what you're talking about, and it makes me sad, but I completely understand. And I think that arrogant, leading with a bit of arrogance, a little bit of I'm better because I know X, Y, Z, because I'm an engineer. I think we really feel at EOT, I think our position is that really needs to change, that engineering is a team sport, that there are multiple intelligences that are distributed across every discipline, not only within STEM, but also across the arts, humanities. Everyone has some value to bring to the process. And the more well-rounded we are, the better we're going to be able to tap into those parts of ourselves in order to collaborate. Like, we collaborate in the real world, right? So I think that the question about what happens within engineering education and the culture of engineering education itself and what it can do to us is a fascinating one. There's a lot there. And Nathan, I love that you're holding on to those creative and artistic parts of yourself, that you're not feeling the need to discard that part of you, because when you graduate, I can almost guarantee you will find a way to engage that and to be just that very well-rounded, I keep using that word, but I don't know how else to say it, like well-balanced, fully functional human being. And I think a lot of us, myself included, sort of had to grow those parts back. I felt like I had to recover from the cultural side of my engineering education that very much had that message about who you have to be smart.
So I just scrolled up to the third slide because you kind of answered this, I think. Be a human. That's the way to engage the kids in your life and the engineering career you love. Be a human. I stole this off your LinkedIn post, Erica. So I didn't know if you had any other thoughts or comments when you were writing this.
Something to tune in for, something to listen for. This was just a guess at what I thought people might like to know. Yeah, I mean, we have best practices, and I'm sure, Becky, you've covered those in the EIR webinars and things. I think lead with the human side. I think that's something we talk about a lot. Start with why, because the why can animate the how and give us strength and resolve to work out all those picky technical details if we know what we're doing it in service of. And so the classic example is, you know, don't just show the robot and go, look, kids, it's a robot. Like, yay, robots. They're great. And some kids are going to love it just because it's a robot. Other kids are maybe going to want to know what it does. Like, why a robot? That's what I would have wanted to know. Is it going to deliver food to people? Is it going to help someone who has a disability get to the grocery store? I don't know.
You're making me
They must
remember.
be hungry. They're all.
You're reminding
related.
me of the, it was a large scale conference style event that we attended in downtown Toronto, and we were in a booth situation, and we brought in
Yes.
our, like, we literally brought in wheat berries that the kids could grind up to make flour and talk about making cookies and that kind of thing. Bye, Andrea. And we were surrounded by robots and like gadgets and stuff, and the kids were flocking to us. You
Yeah,
remember that, Erica?
I totally do. And it was very satisfying for me because I had been on the other side of that a few years earlier at a different event, different flock of kids. I watched it was the Engineers Without Borders student chapter with their little block. They had a bin of rice and blocks to kind of crush the rice. And they kicked our butts with our, sleek engineering handouts. I was there on behalf of my PEO chapter, but yeah, that having something that's accessible, something that has a purpose, like something that's hands-on. I think there's something to that as well, because we're tactile human beings. With that sort of animal nature connected side of us likes to come out and play as well.
Mm-hmm. I know we're just coming up on 1 o'clock, so the last slide is just some calls to action. These don't really apply to the people on this call, but maybe someone watching the recording might be interested to know how they can help. How can they be a human and tell their stories and share their passion about engineering? So get involved with us. We're recruiting right now, so EIR.ca to apply.
You won't regret it.
Bev, if there's any of the engineers in your town that you think would be worthy of joining up, you're welcome to invite them. And then we're always just trying to tell these stories. Like, really, that's our goal. Share better stories about engineering, like the human stories. So we're doing that on all our social media channels and all the usual places. And yeah, any support we can get is very much appreciated. So I'll open it up again for any like final questions or comments for Erica.
I'd just like to say that I kind of feel like I've found my tribe or something.
Yay!
I honestly didn't think I would be still doing this 5 years later. I'm not a big fan of necessarily the standard school board approach or the standard engineering approach. I don't want to offend people, I guess, but within the PEO group, I find there's an older cohort, an older white male cohort that I call the gray suits. And they are the ones who come in to an outreach situation feeling like they come in their gray suit and feel like the kids should just respect them for who they are, and
Yeah.
they want to demonstrate how smart they are, what they can do, without letting the kids just kind of explore and see what happens. Like, I like to give them things that you were talking about, the rice and things. Well, there's no one outcome. You have to put your hands in and see what it feels like. And, what you feel isn't necessarily what somebody else feels, and that's fine, right? So thank you very much for this program. I love it. I'm a big supporter, even if I throw my comments in every so often, but I love it. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you, Bev. We so appreciate it. And I think one thing I didn't anticipate when we started this conversation with kids and said, let's go talk to kids about engineering. That's fun. Let's do it. I didn't anticipate what would emerge over time, which is, let's get our story straight here. Let's decide how we want to show up. And I love your image of the gray suit. And unfortunately, I know exactly what you mean, that there is a certain cohort, sort of a mentality within our profession that says that I am smart and I am important and I deserve respect because, that mentality is out there, but it's not the only voice. It's not the only story in engineering. And I think that so many of us are committed to saying, well, that's fine. I think we understand, you know, there's a legacy there, there's a history there. Those people have their own personal reasons for showing up in that way. And we want to add our story to theirs. And we want to make sure that people understand that there's room for lots of different personalities and strengths and ways of showing up and ways of telling our story. So
well, I'll tell you, within the school that I work in, there is a program that's been run by volunteers from the PEO for quite some number of years. And they put people in the classroom, and they basically won't acknowledge my presence in the school. We don't follow, you know, because of the things that we've just been discussing. Their thing is, here is the box. These are the things that you can do with the things that are in the box. When the box comes back to me, it better have 10 of these, 12 of these. Check the boxes, how many people saw it, how many people, I mean, they produce a report that runs to like 30 to 50 pages every year on how many people use which parts of these boxes. So obviously my stuffed animals and things don't show up in their boxes.
Wow.
So,
I mean, that's another way to tell the story, I guess. I'd be so interested to know what the kids are taking away from an exercise that's run like that, with a mentality like that.
yeah, it's hard because ones who are interested are very interested, but the rest of the class is not.
Yeah. Which sort of perpetuates that almost elitism of like, you're either in or you're out, like you either get it or you don't, as opposed to like, hey, there's something in this for everyone. There's a way for everyone to engage with it, with these ideas.
But I don't think those engineers really feel like they're there for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, to get into engineering school, you pretty much had to be the tops in your class. And then you had to get through engineering school the first year where they call 30% or whatever. Then you had to get a job, and then you had to get to the next level, right? It's all been about an elimination competition journey to get to where you are in your career. So I don't think that they feel like they're speaking to an entire class. I think they're speaking to a certain segment of that class.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it goes against how we explain engineering. You know, we focus a lot on growth mindset and how you can acquire skills and you can practice them. And we don't really subscribe to the either you have it or you don't sort of model. And we're in a way facing an uphill battle, as you said, with some universities having these very stringent entrance requirements that kind of perpetuate that idea that, you know, you've got to be this super smart or like very academically focused robot almost yourself.
I would love to see a lot of the I'd love to see the engineers in residence sort of focus on the transferable skills that anybody could use, regardless of whether they decide to be a professional engineer. Like teaching the kids how to problem solve, how to try again. Like I'd like to give them activities that don't have one specific goal, one specific outcome. Like you either get it like this or it doesn't work.
That Future Cities program, the Future Cities program that I was explaining before you joined us, Erica, Bev, that's what I really liked about the tweaks we made to make it about the experience, is there didn't have to be one right answer. Like it wasn't like the competition where there was a rubric and you had to fit in the box. You could literally take it in any direction you wanted and there wasn't one right answer. And I wanted to add another anecdote because we're seeing lots of new applications come in for volunteers right now. And one of them reached out to me on LinkedIn and sent me a message and said, wow, I wish I had been exposed to a program like this sooner, because it wasn't until I was 22 that I figured out that I wanted to do engineering, and now he's gone through to do it again, right? And we hear that so many times, right? And this fellow was kind of lucky because he did figure it out and was able to switch gears, and it wasn't too late, because we also hear the other side of it where they're well into their career and they're like, well, if I had have heard different messages sooner, I may have made different choices and taken a different path. So yeah, I think this all just kind of speaks to that messaging. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows it's well after 1. So thank you so much for giving us all of this time. I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer if there's other questions, but if you do have to go, please feel free to sign off. And yeah, thanks again for joining us in our monthly Lunch and Learn series that we've been sort of trying out over this past year. Stay tuned, because we do feature somebody every month to share these kinds of stories and help perpetuate these kinds of messages. Any kind of final comments or thoughts that you wanted to kind of wrap up with, Erica?
No, I'm just thinking about what Bev is saying, and I think, as we try to disrupt or change any system, I think it's so important to respect and understand where we've been and why, sort of things have developed as they are in those incumbent systems. And I'm thinking about how, a very different engineering landscape led to the mentality that's there now, that has this sort of built in, almost like a survivor mentality. Like, I'm so proud because I got through it and it was so hard, and really kind of glorifying that. And how, maybe if EOT had the opportunity to take a big paintbrush and just paint that over and start over again in terms of what's out there and how engineers think about themselves, we might do that differently. That it's not about what is so hard to get through, and it's not about an elitist sort of either you got it or you don't, you're born with it or you're not, but it is more about a process and a conversation that anyone can engage with. And maybe we're not even trying to recruit engineers, maybe we just want to make sure everyone understands what it's about, or what it could be.
I'm thinking a lot about it too, because the resilience quality in engineers is a really important one, but there's like being resilient and being like letting it kind of be a bit of your ego, and then there's being resilient and using that motivation to help you get through solving hard problems, and you know what I mean, like getting through complex challenges. That's what engineers have to do. So it's it's interesting to think about kind of the dynamics going on there.
Like, I'm finding the engineering degree now is almost like what a liberal arts degree used to be considered. Like, it gives you a lot of skills, it gives you a lot of exposure to things, but it's not very specific. When I started, of course, you had to be able to do heads down focus on calculations, because we did them with pencil and paper, literally.
This was pre-Excel, I guess.
Oh, it was pre. Yeah, I learned how to program in BASIC. So engineers had to be that way, and it didn't really matter if they were stuck in a dark room with a pencil and paper, and every week you hand in your calculations and somebody checks them and throws them back at you and you do some more. But if engineers want to be considered differently, if they don't want to be that kind of person or be considered that kind of person, then things have to change.
Get our minds out of being a human calculator.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that if that's if that's what you want to do, if that's what the profession wants. But I don't think they can have it both ways. I don't think you can say, why aren't engineers in politics? Why aren't engineers on committees? Why don't they sit on city boards? Well, because the thought of sitting there listening to people kind of babble on about things that they don't know anything about going nowhere isn't fun for most of us.
Yeah, we want to solve the problem a little faster than that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. You're making me think of the movie Hidden Figures, Bev. Has anyone seen that?
No,
Such a
it's
great
on my
movie.
list and I haven't seen it yet.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah, you have to check it out.
Okay.
All right, John just had to drop off. He put a little comment in the chat there that he was fortunate in not really being exposed to kind of that arrogant archetype. So yeah, it's so interesting because everyone's experience is so unique.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. We still have Sana with us as well. I didn't know. So Eric, I don't know if you know Sana. She's with the Ottawa chapter.
Hey, Santa.
Hey, thank you so much. Sorry that I had to take this from my phone because I'm running a couple errands, but I listened to all of it, and I must say that I have the same happy accident as you. I
Oh,
never
nice.
wanted to. I never wanted engineering, and in fact, I hated physics. But what happened is I was so good at everything else with science and math. So I kind of I shot my shot, and I went to engineering, and it was the best thing that has ever happened to me, to be honest. Just the field was
Yay.
perfect. And the fact that you, at the end of the day, you're doing something to give back to your community is huge. So I was so passionate enough that after graduating, I got involved with all the engineering associations and organizations, and I worked with Virtual Ventures and Boys and Girls Club of Ottawa to help make a difference as well and do engineering activities for them. So I just want to thank you truly for sharing your amazing experience. And sorry that I don't have my camera on, but
Oh my gosh.
we'll meet again in person.
Thank you, Santa. Oh my gosh, that's so great to hear. I'm really, really glad that you shared that. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're involved with our programs. These are exactly the kinds of stories we're hoping to shed light on.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yay. Oh, free energy.
Lots of
I could just talk all day here. That's great.
Yeah.
I just actually wanted to share kind of the other side of the story and why I find these programs so important. So I grew up, my dad's an engineer, so, you know, engineering was always kind of mentioned around the house. He was very bad at describing what it is that an engineer does, though. So, you know, every time I'd ask, oh, we problem solve. That's good, Dad.
Most engineers are bad at it, to be fair.
Yeah. But then my mom actually, she kind of had the same situation as you, where she grew up in a very small town, and she was the first in her class to go to university, or first in her family, sorry. And she had no idea what to go for, especially because then she couldn't just Google and try to figure it out that way. She had to go through all the big giant books. So she went to the university fair to figure it out. And one of the people started talking with her, and he said, oh, you're good at science and math? Okay, go into finance then. So she was sent down the finance path, which was interesting. And then she actually started dating my dad about halfway through. And then throughout their relationship, she found out what engineering was. And she realized once she graduated that she would have found engineering like much more rewarding and would have rather done that. But at the time, it wasn't an option for her to like go through and go back throughout it. So that is one thing where she had the exposure, like, you know, EOT gives. It would have been great for her because then she would have known going in. But yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. And gosh, what an indirect path to take, to have to date an engineer to figure out you want to be one. That can't be the path for everyone. We need to make sure there are easier ways.
Yeah, definitely. She said until she met my dad, she thought it was just the person who drove the train. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great synopsis of what we're here to change. I think that's great. And I actually found out from my dad recently that his dad wanted him to do engineering and business together. And I say sometimes like what I've sort of evolved my career into is kind of a combination of engineering and business. So yeah, it's always neat when we can step into these stories that are not just going on within our own lifetime, but also in the origins of our family, those bigger generational stories. So you're living out that dream.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
making
No,
your own
really
way.
happy.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, Erica, thanks for joining us for our lunch and learn today. I know everyone always loves to hear from you, so it was really fun having you on as part of the conversation today. And I have to say, this has probably been one of the most interactive events we've had. So really fun to see all that happening and hear all the stories and everything.
Yay.
Thank you so much. And what else do I want to say? I guess, well, I usually like to thank our sponsors as well for the work that we do at Engineers of Tomorrow. We really couldn't do it without all the generous support of all of our volunteers. So we're so grateful for all of their support, as well as our financial sponsors. We have Queen's Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science, Woodbridge, Smith and Anderson, and Linamar. So thank you so much to all of our sponsors. All right, so thanks again, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your nice, warm, sunny day today.
Thank you so much, Becky.